All right, I'd like to call to order a meeting of the North Andover School Committee for Thursday, September 22nd, 2016, and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just to remind everyone, this meeting is being recorded, and please silence any electronic devices. Thank you. So let's begin with public comment.
Good evening, everyone. Martin McGrath, President of the North Andover Music Association, and this is Kim Hurst, Treasurer of the North Andover Music Association. And during this public comment time, we just wanted to go ahead and mention the request that we had submitted to the school committee to have a waiver of the fees for moving the movable bleachers from their current locations onto the far side of Walsh Stadium for the October 1st NESBA Marching Band competition at North Andover High School. So are there any questions that you have initially?
Mr. Chair, if you would indulge.
Please.
So, Mr. McGrath and Sir, thanks for coming forward with that. Just a quick couple of questions. Do you have an idea what the fee cost will be?
Well, based...
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't been assessed a fee or given a quote for it for this year, but based on what it was last year, it's approximately between $600 to $700.
And it brings the bleachers to the field configure it for the event, and then it returns the bleachers to their prior location?
Yes.
Okay. And
yes.
If I recall, last time we asked, is there any way that the volunteers can assist to offset that cost in any way?
Yeah, I'm afraid that they can. It really needs to be done by the custodians because it requires specialized equipment to go ahead and move the bleachers. There's two different sets of bleachers, and they each require their own sort of carrier equipment to get them moved from the baseball field onto the Walsh Stadium and then from up in the soccer field down there.
And I know that I don't think we're going to meet before the event. Is there anything in your planning or operations plan that would be different if you knew today whether the cost to move the bleachers would be waived or not?
Kim, do you want to comment on that?
I guess in general, no, we would still absolutely have the event. It's just that we pay for a lot of the different things that happen that day, such as the custodians and the police detail, and if there's a fire detail. And after a certain point, if we're having to pay hundreds and hundreds of extra dollars, then it becomes less likely that we'd want to do it in the future. And the amount of revenue that we get and what we do as an organization offsets the need, we think, for any user fees to be needed in a music department. Because
this is an academic event.
Because, well, it's an academic event, and it is it happens on the field, and they're getting graded as well. So that's just what I have to say.
Okay. And the last question I have is, what is the impact of the fee in terms of the enrichment that you provide? Can you convert it into is 3 stipends to one of the field trips, or it's how does that translate?
Sure. To put it in perspective, this will also address a question that I got from Mr. McDevitt about the band going to away football games. One of the reasons that the marching band doesn't go to away football games is because of the cost. It costs $1,000 to go ahead and move the band because we require, this year, we have such a large band, such a successful music program, we require 4 buses, and we're also going to require 2 trucks in order to move all of the equipment and sets. So anytime the band goes anywhere, it costs $1,000. Other metrics on that are that would be 1.5 band techs that the school district does go ahead and pay for some of the band techs that work with the marching band at the beginning of the year, but that's only about half, I think.
Oh gosh, no, we've spent $5,000 on band techs.
Okay, but I mean, we cover at least half.
No, we cover $5,000. The school covers a lot, a different amount. So the school covers one coach for each, one percussion coach, one guard coach, and one marching band assistant. But there's about 8 or so other people on the field that we all cover.
Right.
So.
And it's also the equivalent to one of the clinicians that we would bring in. That's essentially our budget for like jazz night or something like that.
Or it could be another 13 chorus dresses, because we have now 192 people in the chorus. In the past, we've asked, and the high school did buy the first round of chorus dresses, and now we've taken over from them. So we buy chorus dresses, we buy all the tuxes for the all the men in the program. So the movement fee would create us to have to find another way to buy about 13 chorus dresses that we need.
Yeah, so that's a significant amount. Do you recall off the top what your contribution to the schools were last year? Something north of 45,000?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I know that we took in, we're one of the booster clubs that has the lowest amount of buffer. If you go on to the Attorney General's site, you can look at all the booster clubs and how much they started the year with and how much they ended the year with. We start with about 14,000, we end it with 13,000. In the meantime, we took in and spent $60,000. Some of that was student paying for their shoes and things like that. So the rest of it was stuff we made and then gave right back out.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I ask a question?
First of all, I want to thank you guys for everything you do. So just start there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been just so amazed at the support that NAMA has given the North Andover Public Schools in the last year, and it's frankly unparalleled in almost any district. So I just want to thank you. Start there. So I went to the event last year, and I'm wondering, do you need both sets or do you just need one? Because I went last year, and they were not full the whole time, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but I wonder, could you get away with one and have the fee be less? That's my only question.
There's a big difference. So last year, there were only 12 bands on the schedule, and the attendance was skewed more towards the smaller divisions. So you have less band members coming, you therefore have less spectators coming. The other thing was that it was really cold.
Yeah, I remember. I was
miserable
freezing.
that day. And we appreciate you being out there when it was rough weather.
And
this
rainy,
year,
if I remember.
Yeah, this year we have 16 bands.
Okay.
Which the capacity for us is 18. So we're close. It is skewed a little more towards the middle and upper divisions, so we're expecting higher numbers in terms of band members and therefore in terms of spectators. And we already know now that it's going to be fantastic weather. So people will come and they'll stay.
Okay. I just thought because I think last year that was
Yeah, I mean,
and people came and then they left.
right.
So there was never,
It didn't
if
seem
they
like
stay the whole day like they normally do, then we only have 1,000 seats.
Right.
And we need, a couple years ago, we did sell 1,000 tickets, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can imagine after this conversation, I was
Yeah.
looking at those bleachers the whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. The thing is, though, I mean, I know that they typically don't do it till right before because they're waiting to look at the weather.
Right.
And we do too. So if we see that it's a total washout that day, don't move those bleachers. We're
Okay.
good. We're good.
All right.
yeah,
Yeah. And
Okay,
they
thank
say
you.
do it so, I know Dave will do it probably Friday. If
All right. Thank you.
right. And one additional comment to follow up on that is that in our mind, because we've had to address this issue for a number of years now, is that one of the things that we hope the school committee would consider is that we really feel that there's a sore need for more permanent seating or a way to get more seating at Walsh Stadium for events much more easily and with less cost. Because if you went to the Haverhill football game, anytime there's the game is close enough so that neighboring
Yep.
townsfolk are going to come, just those the permanent stands there, it was crazy jam-packed.
It was.
I mean, folks were really on top of each other
Yeah.
there, which is not cool. It's also not welcoming to folks from other towns. And,
we rely on that. We
and
want
we-
them to have fun to come back next year because this is something we like
Right.
to keep doing.
Right.
And so, particularly for the marching band competition, through the leadership in NAMA over the years and the planning that has been put together by previous board members, we run a really good show. And people are very pleased with us, with how we run it. The organization is very pleased with us. And so we do get good attendance. We want people to come back, and this is really an opportunity for us to do some fundraising and not really hit up the same band parents over and over again. we're getting people from neighboring towns to buy hamburgers and hot dogs for us. So I don't want to see that this becomes a bottleneck or it becomes an issue where people aren't going to come back because there's no place to sit when you get there. So I hope that can be part of the planning and consideration.
How much money do you raise from this one event?
We're budgeted for $9,000 is what we'll make on this event.
Okay.
Last year, we made $8,500 with the cold weather and the 12 bands, so a conservative number is $9,000.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much. We're going to be discussing this a little bit more in a minute, so
Thank you.
stick around.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Since we have no recognition tonight, Courtney, please join us.
I apologize for Cole's absence. He asked me last time how to know where to find the school committee meeting agendas, and I, at the time, had no idea, and I had to do some research online. So I'll make sure to tell him next time.
Okay.
But just a few things. Senior year is really taking its toll. The SATs are coming up on October 1st. Guidance this whole week had meetings with their assigned students to talk about transcript, release forms, and applications to college. Senior class pictures are at Drummond Park this Sunday, and the senior yearbook questionnaire, memory, and baby photos are due tomorrow. And it's just, seniors have to juggle with all these things, and it's just something that, we'll have good memories with in the future. Some clubs, I know next week is the first club meeting for Pre-Health Club and Asian Culture Club, and I've seen Students Against Destructive Decisions posters everywhere. The clubs are just booming, and it's so great, and I know so many freshmen are interested in joining every single one. The Environmental Club today just donated fresh produce from their community garden to the Lazarus House, and it's just great.
Great.
That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Courtney.
Have a nice day.
Tell Cole it's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
Good luck on the SAT.
That's right.
Okay, so consent agenda, we have one set of minutes to approve from September 8th. I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented in our packet.
So moved?
Second.
Any additions or corrections to those minutes?
There's only one comment, Mr. Chair. In the school committee meeting calendar, I thought there was a request to share the agenda topics so we can make decisions on the upcoming meetings, for remote participation. I don't know if that was clear or not.
Yeah, may I answer? We're still working on it, and we will do so in the next few days.
Okay, great. I didn't see that in the
It really
summary.
is just us trying to figure out the cadence for the fall, and part of it is, as you'll see in my goals, is what presentations we're going to agree that I'm going to do. So we will have at least through the budget process done.
Okay.
I think after January.
If it's coming, then I have no request to amend the minutes.
Yeah, but we'll
Okay,
get it
thank
done.
you.
Anything else? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. All right.
Okay, so superintendent's report, I'm going to start with a few things, and then we'll go into the facilities usage review. So we'll start with Mr. Gilligan, just talk a little bit. We've got a lot of exciting things going on, so I hope you indulge us a little bit to kind of let you know what's going on in our different areas. So, Mr. Gilligan?
So as many of you know, over the past few years, we've been able to train about half the elementary staff in the Lucy Calkins writing, and we had to make plans this year to get the other half through the program and the different units of study, particularly around opinion writing, information writing, narrative writing, and it's been a really exciting week. We've had about a 3-year ongoing relationship with the Reading Public Schools, where we have a professional learning community working together. So for the past 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we've spent 2 days with our elementary teachers down in Reading and 2 days with the Reading teachers here. And Lorene, Marks, Ann, Joyce, and Jackie Taylor, Rudolph, our reading teachers, have been teaching this professional development. So it's gone really, really well, and I couldn't be more proud. In addition, we're also kicking off and running Foundations professional development for K and 1. So that's taking place actually tomorrow and here. We will be packed with teachers and really looking forward to it. I had an opportunity to sit in the other day, and I don't think I should probably say this out loud, but heck, Lorene, Ann, and Jackie can make a lot of money as professional developers out in the real world. I mean, it was...
I really hope they're not watching.
Yeah, I don't think they are. Really top notch, and the comments from the teachers Professional development isn't always the most popular topic in a lot of districts, and the feedback we've been getting, particularly in the last year, for the differentiation and the different units, it's been awesome. So I'm really proud of our staff doing the work and how engaged they were, and I'm really proud of our staff that's providing the instruction. So.
And just to comment, there has been a lot of teachers leaving their classrooms to do this type of PD, and so we thank and appreciate the students. And one of the things is that actually those of us at central office have been doing some of the substituting, which has been really fun. So, Mr. Gilligan, what class is going to get stuck with you tomorrow?
I am with 4G at the Thompson School, and Mr. Raymond, the principal, just texted me about an hour ago to remind me and make sure I was showing up for 7:50 sharp tomorrow morning.
So, Mr. Gilligan, when are you putting together the same dream team for math?
Well, as you've noticed, Mr. Limpert, I don't know if you've been studying the strategic plan, but in phase 2, there's a recommendation in the curriculum area for a math coach, very similar to Jackie and Ann, while we move into that direction. And I wouldn't be surprised down the road as we move into reading itself for maybe some additional requests, but I don't want to speculate too far beyond but phase 2.
And then Mr. Mealy did a walkthrough today with KB&A Architects, and we just want to talk a little bit about what happened today.
So we walked through each of the elementary schools, looking at the current space usage and, for instance, which schools have full art rooms, music rooms, so getting an idea of what the schools are like now, the condition of the portables, and the possibility of the use of each school in the addition of classrooms. We walked all 5 of them, even though we've already talked about the unlikelihood of using a couple of our schools just based on the footprint that exists at Sargent and Thompson. But they looked at all 5 and are just considering all possibilities and putting together the pros and cons of each one of each school and of different options that we might have.
What's the next step in that process?
Then they'll start to draft the report, make sure from our feedback that they've considered all considerations and options before they draft the final.
We proposed last time.
Yep.
But we just want to let you know they're here, they're looking at schools, they're doing the work to look at all of our schools. And then Dr. Strait was going to talk a little bit about our new BT model and how that's gotten off. As if you remember last year, we got rid of the transition program. We transitioned the transition program at the Franklin Elementary School and created a new model, and it's off to a pretty exciting start, I think.
It really is. It's met with great success. So we've hired a board-certified behavior analyst, Sarah Clifford, who is looking over it district-wide to develop this program of working with the behavior technician aides. So the first thing that she did was she spent a week with BTAs, behavior technician aides, and did some trainings with them, both some online trainings as well as in-person trainings for understanding, the nature of students who maybe have a developmental delay, maybe have some behavioral issues, how to work with those students in understanding the different aspects of behavior plans and implementing that within the classroom. So the students are integrated in 4 out of 5 of our elementary schools right now. So Ms. Clifford goes about all of the different schools and oversees the plans, collects data on the students, and the principals are just thrilled with how this is working. The students are meeting with great success. We're also continuing to move forward next week with the training for the general education teachers, the classroom teachers, the special education liaisons, as well as some of the teacher assistants as well, to train them in some of these techniques and understanding how to work with students in this realm. So it's really meeting with great success.
That's great. Thank you.
It's exciting. These kids are in their neighborhood schools and being included in classrooms with these specialized teaching assistants. So, and hopefully it's going to lead to us less contracted services with people that we used to contract with. So we actually believe that in the end this will at least pay for itself, if not save money.
Absolutely, because in addition to that, what Sarah and I are working on is developing an in-house home training series for families and for students, and that certainly is going to benefit the students in the long run as well as benefit our budget.
So, and then I just want to update two things. First of all, Mr. Gilligan and Mr. Mealy will not be with us for the next two meetings as they are headed over to China. As part of a relationship with the Cambridge Institute, we have two students who are currently attending North Andover High School, and I will bring that forward in an agenda coming up. But as part of it, in working with the Cambridge Institute, one of the things that they've found very successful is actually to have a school district in Massachusetts actually partner with the school in China, so that the students from that school come here as a cohort, and we create a relationship with that school. So Mr. Mealy and Mr. Gilligan are going to be joining 6 other districts: Natick, Needham, Ashland. And one of the ideas is we are actually proposed to be partnered with a district right outside of Shanghai. So they're going to have an opportunity to meet the administrators in Shanghai and start to develop the relationship. So this is being paid for out of the funds coming from the Cambridge Institute. So they are headed over there. So we are excited to have them, and we will miss them. And good luck to China.
So how long? And a full YouTube-like trip report when you get back, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
with photos.
And movies, right?
So
How long will they be gone, Dr.
10 days.
10 days.
10 days. But because we have 2 school committee meetings right next to each other, we're going to miss them for 2 meetings. So you leave like the day of the first and come back the day of the second or something like that, right? It's like...
Yeah, I mean, we only would have missed one until we rearranged.
Yeah. So you're going to have to put up with Dr. Straight and I. I apologize.
That's okay. We're fine with it.
All right. And then the last thing is I had feel free to jump in, Ms. Mabley. We had a good meeting today with our co-presidents of the PTOs, and just a few things to report back. At the next meeting, we anticipate a sizable donation from the various PTOs to help fund the model classroom. So that will be exciting. We'll also talk about the impact of the model classroom. We've gotten some great quotes from students and teachers about how great this new technology is. So that was fun. We're also, just another comment, the food rescue project that was at the middle school last year is actually going to expand to all 5 elementary schools. Great. We're working, Christy Hale and team are working to expand it to all 5 middle schools. And we're really excited about that. We think it's going to be great. And the thing that we've also found with food rescue is it's also about teaching kids healthy recycling habits.
Right.
So it's exciting. The food that is not thrown out and is reused goes back to 3 of our elementary schools through our nurses, really, to support kids who may be hungry, and that's working really well. And then the rest of it is actually donated to a homeless shelter. So it's working out incredibly well, and we're excited about that. And then the last thing I have to report, and then you can jump in on anything else, is Understanding Our Differences, which is a program to help teach the I in RAISE, the inclusive practices and inclusion, is a program in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade that we have adopted to help teach kids about different types of learning abilities, disabilities, and we're excited to be rolling that out in at least our 4th and 5th grades this year. And if anyone's watching and wants to volunteer, it takes a cadre of volunteers to run these lessons in our schools. Understanding Our Difference has all the training online. It really is do the work. It's plug and play. But we do need volunteers to come in and help facilitate the work that we're doing. So we're excited about that.
I actually served as a volunteer they did 2 pilots last year at Franklin, and the second one I went and helped out with a group, and it was a lot of small group work, doing various tasks that kind of simulate some struggles that some students have when they're learning. And it did take a lot of volunteers, but it was incredibly inspiring, and you did see kids getting a sense of what some of the challenges are that students meet, and ask great questions. It happened to be the time I went was when we had students from the high school who came and talked about their experiences and how they've overcome certain things, and it was really quite excellent. So I highly endorse people volunteering to help. So it was fun.
Did I miss anything from the co-president's
I don't think
meeting?
so. No. The only one thing was when you talked about recycling, that Christy did identify that some of the schools don't have some of the recycling materials in place, and hopefully the PTOs are going to buy those for just basically bins and a couple of things. Right. So it was really a great project.
And the last thing is, as you know, we adopted Alice last year.
That's right.
Police chief, the fire chief, and I are working on a letter that's going to be going out to parents explaining our process, where we're going to have meetings at each school for parents, and we're going to have work with the kids and explain that whole process very transparently. You do know that we did a training the first day of school for the teachers, but now as we roll it out to the parent community. And I'm excited that the police chief, the fire chief, and I are going to co-sign a letter. I think that sends a really nice message to the community that this isn't just something the schools is doing, this is something the entire town is doing to try to keep our schools and our kids and our faculty inside our schools as safe as possible. So that will be going out soon. There's a lot of logistics to coordinate for that one, but soon. So that's all. And now, Mr. Mealy, a little bit about the facilities usage review that we talked about.
And this is kind of guesswork on my part. I think as the request, as an impetus, caused Chairman Teresi to request kind of a status report on the subcommittee that was formed. Mr. Gross headed it up for a little while, and Mr. Teresi did last year. And I'm guessing that he probably wanted to just use that, what we have drafted so far, certainly not ready for to make any proposal yet, to kind of update on where we were in that process. But again, I'm just guessing, so I thought we should wait until Mr. Teresi is back before we discuss what it is he wanted to talk about with regards to the subcommittee work.
And this would be a revision to the policy, is that sort of what we're envisioning?
It includes possible changes to the existing policy. It includes possible changes in rates and some suggested changes in procedures as well.
If I could, when we were working on the policy several years ago, it was more about inventorying the process and understanding where the requirements and the requests were coming, so we could evaluate whether we were reasonable in our fee structures and whether the requests were being processed in a reasonable fashion. I think and I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm sure there'll be a more thorough review. What I think we're facing now is a question of, what is a fee versus what is a cost.
Right.
And then how do we divide the structures between, this is a school-sponsored project versus this is a non-school sponsored project. And I think we heard a good example where the school is hosting, we have a support organization operating the event, but it does boil back to it's an academic event, and our policy may not be able to classify that consistently across the different ways that organizations take advantage of the facilities.
I do think that this year it's become a little bit more clear to me that we do need to make sure we clarify that, because I think it's easy to waive a fee. It's not something that we're going to get, and so that's not a problem. However, to waive an expense means that the school district is still paying the money, right? And it's as though we're donating to the event, the school department is. That may or may not be a problem, but it's just something we've got to think through, and I think we have to make sure that we explicitly define that in our policy about how that's going to work, because I think that is a little bit different, and I think we may want to make sure we do that knowingly, not just back into it. And I think, in my mind, I hadn't really gotten that clarity between a fee and an expense. And, we have expenses for other events, but we have to clarify which kind of events and how that applies.
Yeah,
and all
absolutely.
that. So I think a policy review will be a nice, appropriate vehicle to do that. And then, again, speaking to the two of you, again, we may want to kick the ball down the road one more year and grandfather it in, and not make you wait for us to go through some lengthy
sausage-making
exercise of thousands of pages of policy. So we can talk about that, but unfortunately, again, as Mr. McDevitt pointed out, it's going to be after the fact. But bear with us, and we'll do the best we can. But be aware that we it may change in the future. We may want to clarify fees versus expenses and how we deal with that, and it could be true for all organizations. So I'm just saying that's my sense of it at this point.
Mr. Mealy, from a budgeting perspective, do you anticipate some of those as you're starting to put together the budget, as you kind of model off of what you've done in prior years and what we consider waived fees?
Or waived costs.
Waived costs.
The easiest answer is we don't factor it in to the budget. It's a revolving account, and it's something that this wouldn't be the only thing that we kind of supplement or cover. There are many events that take place that the fee structure right now doesn't cover the true cost to us.
Right.
And that was all, as Mr. Gross was saying, that will be coming forward with the subcommittee report. Do we have to change things in order to cover those, or do we continue to proceed as we have been, and knowing some of those are going to come out of our own budget?
Okay. I just didn't know if you anticipated that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Anything else?
so that's so we're moving on, just so you guys know.
Yeah, you
yes.
can go home and do your homework now, if that's it. Or prepare for your SATs, whatever's next.
So the next agenda item is, we had a conversation about my and our goals, and so I took a stab at trying to come up with a similar format from what we did last year around my goals. And a few things. First of all, if you look, we have a new and exciting strategic plan overview that maybe Ms. Zagari, I think she did, so you could post that, Jim, is we're trying to make it look pretty. So if you look, it looks like this, all right? We're trying to make it look pretty. Isn't that exciting? Look at that. But if you'll see, we talked about assigning each of the initiatives to one of the four of us. So Dr. Straight is going to take 3 of the 4, of course, and all students as they follow, they really fall under student services. Jim Mealy is going to look at the school-level leadership and collaboration structures, which is with a specific focus actually on the high school this year, and he's going to take the lead on that. And then Mr. Gilligan is going to take the PD, the multi-year curriculum plan, and the common assessments. And the reality is Mr. Mealy is going to be working with me on the first 2 also. So we've met as a team. We feel like it's good for us each to have an initiative or 2 or 3 that we're kind of the point person on. So that's how we divided that up. You can see the initials. This will not be in a public document where we put everybody's name there. So that leaves us with 4 of the strategic initiatives, and the 2 that we talked about of us sharing are the decreasing the class size and then ensuring that we have sufficient access to technology. So if you look here, we have some key actions on the decreasing of the class size, and you can see a lot of this has to do with the meeting with the architects, December having the architects present to the school committee. The school committee, let's hope to vote to approve one of our approaches for additional classroom size, additional classrooms, and then really it's about advocating with the town to get this through town meeting. The benchmarks, the feasibility study that will come to all of you, that hopefully we will approve, and then any meetings we have to have with the town officials, and those are kind of the mid-cycle. I mean, the reality of this one, it's going to be pretty easy to measure. Did we do it or we didn't? I mean, you know, I mean, I didn't get into like all the measurements because it's going to happen or it's not, if that makes sense.
Yep, no, makes sense.
Then in terms of the technology, you'll see that the idea here is a lot of this has been done, the whole model classroom, the Chromebooks, the network infrastructure, the Lucy Calkins writing program and foundations. And then we're hoping to have a full assessment of instructional materials by January for our budgeting process, so we really know what we need to buy where, pre-K to 12. And then our benchmarks, model classrooms, Chromebooks, and then inventory, all of those things. And then in terms of evidence, I was thinking, and this is where I said I hadn't gotten all the agenda set for the meetings, because I wanted to make sure you agreed with this, was that we would have Mike come do a status of our technology plan at some point this fall. I was going to ask when the training for Lucy Calkins and foundations, if I asked them right now, they would pass out. So if I could do it a little, yeah, they would start going for those higher paid consulting jobs. So ask Lorene Marks and team to come in and do a update on Lucy Calkins and foundations. A summary report of our instructional materials, and then kind of in terms of 2 more quantitative measures, looking at our mid-year DIBEL scores. Are we making progress in terms of that? It's a great way to look at K3. And then report on the usage of Chromebooks. I always think that Mike does a nice job. He tracks every day how many of our Chromebooks are being used, and it's good for us to see, have we met saturation point? Have we not? Are we still, do we still have more demand than supply? And we could have real-time answers to that. That's not just pie in the sky. So that's my thought for our goals.
So my only request would be to have him come and give us a an update on where we're at with the technology sooner rather than later.
Sure,
Just
I
so
can do
we
that.
know.
And he won't pass out if I ask him to come.
No, it's just more like a status.
No, I can ask him to do that.
Nothing too hard.
I think that's helpful for budgeting purposes.
Yeah, no, it would definitely be in October or November.
Yeah.
We also have a request for mid-cycle evidence of what the status of the curriculum budget overload or overpay would be, the special account that the town manager had set up, and where we are on Medicaid reimbursement.
Yeah,
for
so the Medicaid reimbursement process, I had a long talk with Town Manager Mailer yesterday about this, is the way that it's going to work and the way it works in most towns that do this is we're going to make it through this fiscal year. And then whatever is above the agreed $165,000 is going to be transferred to our FY 18 budget. So we will be able to buy, because it's a lag. It just, you kind of have to wait a year. And remember, we put in the placeholder this year, the teacher, so that we could buy all the Lucy Calkins and Foundations materials. So what is going to be work for us is we will get the money on July 1. The good thing is most of this is going to be, if not all of it, is going to be to purchase instructional materials that we need for September. So we will have the POs ready to go, if not some of the materials already shipped, and then have in July 1. So we'll know. But the actual budget transfer is not going to happen until all the bills have kind of been taken care of, and it'll be a transfer.
If we don't meet the goal in terms of our
So
curriculum plan.
then we get nothing. However, we get updates on a quarterly basis, so we know if we're on track. So what we'll do at some point, kind of in March, is be able to say, are we making the 165 benchmark? How high above it are we? And Dr. Strait can talk about that. We pretty much know where we are at every point.
And can I just
yeah.
say that we've actually been very consistently 220 to 230 for the last 4 years, and have been putting even more effort into making sure that people are signing so that we qualify for that. So we're pretty confident that we'll be there.
Dr. Strait's actually doing a training next week for people.
Right, so we've done a significant amount of work of really analyzing, who would be the contributing staff members towards this Medicaid initiative, and made sure that Medicaid knows about the staff members, and we've put together a training for next week where we've brought some people in that are going to really emphasize the importance of this initiative, why they need to understand who these students are, as well as do a training with EastBed so that the staff understands how to go into the system and input their hours and input their time. So we're hoping from that we're going to see a large increase as well.
That's super, and I think that's great that we're focusing on that. I guess my point is, would it be important for us to know at budgeting time whether we're behind plan and we shouldn't expect that, or whether we're far ahead of schedule, at which point we can make an intelligent decision on perhaps being a little more aggressive with our curriculum upgrades.
So I can just do a quarterly reports on Medicaid.
Right.
The biggest challenge is working with any federal government system. I'll just give you a really good example. We've been working really hard to get additional people to sign the waivers so that we can actually, so I think we had 42 people that were in the system. We got an additional 70 people. So the challenge is those names and families don't get loaded until January 1st, even though we've had them since June. So even though they're in the system, the federal government doesn't take, so any name before January 1st goes in, any name after January 1st, we have to wait a whole nother year lag. So the challenge with this is it's a lag. And once we get rolling, I think it's going to work, but we're in the infant stages of it.
Who are the people who are getting the training? They're teachers, or who are?
It's a variety of staff members. So there are teachers who are getting training, some of our administrative staff. We have our nurses being trained, school psychologists, speech and language pathologists. Some of our teacher assistants are being trained. So there's really quite a plethora of different staff members who are being trained. And it's really all dependent on the students that they work with as well. So we're really earmarking those specific people, as well as pushing to get the document signed. One area that's important as well that I want families to understand, and for you to understand, is when they sign this document saying, yes, the school can collect Medicaid for the work that they do with my child. That by no means takes anything away from the family that they may be receiving through other resources. So it's only increasing what the school has a right to obtain. So.
Great.
In terms of my goals, and by the way, the first two, the reality is Mr. Mealy is going to be working very closely with with us on both of those goals. So we put with Jim Mealy just because I wanted to be. The second one is this comprehensive human resources model, and I would be working with Carrie Wahlberg, our new director of human resources, on this. And there's a number of components of this. One is really to look and adapt our evaluation process for both the teaching assistants and our professional staff, and that will be part of IDB. So that's why I thought this would be a good goal, as I'm really involved in this. We actually just sent out a joint letter to the staff. I actually will send that to you. I'm sorry I didn't, but we will send that to you tomorrow. And basically, we clarified a number of aspects of the evaluation process that felt less than clear. So the union presidents and I sent a joint letter about it, which was really good, which included what does exemplary mean? What does proficient mean? What does needs improvement? And we learned that as a school committee last year, that those are difficult. And so we came up with standard language about what they mean. What do they mean on an indicator? What do they mean overall? What do they mean on a standard? So it was... And then we also really clarified the process with dates so that everyone was clear about that. One of the challenges, as we saw last year too, when you all did my evaluation, is what does evidence look like? So we actually gave a template of what good evidence would look like. And then we actually, with Dr. Straight's leadership, we actually redid the teaching assistant evaluation a little bit to just make it clearer and easier to fill out. So that's been done already, and that was sent out to all staff yesterday. So that's one component, and then the other and then the idea is to get a committee together this year to look at what tweaks we would like to make as part of IBB. And part of the letter yesterday that was sent out was asking people to join the committee. We have administrators willing to be on the committee. We now need teachers, teaching assistants to be on the committee. So that, I'm hoping, will be mostly wrapped up by the time we move into IBB, so it doesn't bog down the process, because it could. So.
And it sounds like the union leadership is all on board.
Yeah, I mean, joint letter, I think, was a really nice message for us to send. And then the other is to really work on emphasizing the importance of professional teacher status. And I just want to give you a date, and I'll have Bev send it out to you tomorrow, again, is on October 25th at the Rotunda at Stevens Memorial. We're going to honor the 9 teachers who gained professional teacher status this year. We're going to ask them to come and their families to come. Each principal will talk about them, and we will celebrate them entering the professional teacher ranks here in the North Andover Public Schools. So I will make sure that you get invited to that officially, and then the administrative team, the leadership team of the district, has decided that our professional practice goal this year is going to be to focus on increasing the conversations around the evaluation process for non-PTS faculty. So one of the byproducts of the way that North Andover has rolled out the evaluation process is it's all been online and digital, and the let me just give you a quick example. A principal goes in and watches a teacher. They go back and they write up their notes, and they ask a reflective question, which was part of how we rolled out the evaluation here. And then what happens is that gets sent out to the teacher on My Learning Plan. The teacher then can go in and comment on that reflective question. So a lot of the interaction around good teaching and learning is happening via email and computer. And we had a long conversation this summer at our retreat to say, we really need to increase the conversation around this, that when people are getting feedback, it's not happening by reflective questions and then comments back and forth on it, because you don't really get you can't see people's faces, you can't really understand what they can't ask clarifying questions. So, yeah, and so what we've done is we've really come up with a process where for our non-PTS faculty, which is where we're going to start, is when teachers do their goals, they're actually going to meet with their evaluator to do their goals. 3 out of the 5 for our first-year teachers and 2 out of the 4 walkthroughs, they will make sure there's a face-to-face conversation about what was seen. And then the summative evaluation, it'll be a face-to-face conversation, so that we will guarantee 4 to 5 face-to-face conversations for our non-PTS. There's a mid-cycle, too, where either side can say they'd like a face-to-face conversation, but really our goal as a leadership team is to have more meaningful conversations about good teaching and learning, which we believe will enhance both the principal's ability to talk about good teaching and learning and the faculty and staff's understanding of what is a North Andover standard of good teaching and learning.
And expectations
Yeah.
for them and everything. Yeah.
So we're excited about that goal, and the whole leadership team drafted it and bought into it. And as we did last year, really around getting our evaluations completed and learning the process, which is our professional practice goal, this feels like the next step is actually getting better at it. Yeah, okay, so that's that goal, and then you'll see, you can kind of see what the mid-cycle, and then the last one is, I admittedly admit is kind of my fun, which is our innovative learning-centered experiences. I hope it's okay, I have some fun. And then a few things here, Fit Money, the senior capstone program, travel experiences for all students, and other business partnership opportunities. So specifically, and then continuing to support our partnership with Stevens Memorial Library, which has just been fantastic. I mean, just the fact that they're hosting us for the PTS ceremony, that's just great to do it in the Rotunda, right? Like, I mean, it just makes sense. So benchmarks, Fit Money curriculum rolled out through grade 4, senior capstone pilot program implemented at the high school this year, which we believe will be done. I'm actually being funded by the funds from the Cambridge Institute students. That's how we're paying for it, so that's exciting. And then this Live Your Learning Education Fund that we have created. The dinner will be on November 5th at the Bright View Retirement Center. And it will be a 5-course tasting menu, and when you see the menu, you might think you want to come. So the food will be fabulous. The wait staff will be horrible because it's going to be many of us in this room. So, and then also the One Community, One Author visit of Jackie Woodson on November 28th. And then just some stuff. I want to do a Fit Money update at some point this year. I thought it would be awesome at the end of the year to have some of our North Andover High School seniors who did the capstone program come in and talk to us about that experience. In my understanding of capstone programs, and I think they're really building off of models that I know, will probably be asked to judge. I mean, so kids have to give a formal presentation at the end of their capstone project, and we'll be asked to go in and judge. So hopefully the townwide fundraising dinner, and let's just hope we can fund some kids. I think that'll be did we do it? Did we pull it off? Did we make any money? And then whether or not the One Author, One Community visit happens. So those were what I was thinking about.
Can I ask a really quick question about the Live Your Learning Education Fund and the dinner? I mean, is that its own 501c3 or?
No, we're actually very excited to announce that it's actually going to fall in as one of the programs under the North Andover Education Foundation. And they're big supporters, and it just makes a lot of sense.
Okay. I just didn't know if there was something else separately being set up for that.
Nope.
So they are
on board.
That makes me feel
okay.
Me too.
Yep. So, and the funding will come through them, you know, and they will be supportive of it. So,
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
and yes, absolutely. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Great.
May I ask you a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Great. So I know that we have a lot of pilots ongoing. I'm wondering how we can get our benchmarks aligned with go, no-go decision for enhancing. We're not doing the pilot again next year, just so we can get a feel for what do we need to include in our budgeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the pilots that we have going, let's try to think about what pilots we have going. We're going to have Fit Money. The capstone project is going to be impossible to know because we won't have really done it. And we're using an outside source to fund it, which I think, I mean, it will make a go, no-go decision at the end of it, but it wouldn't necessarily be our budgeting process. And Fit Money isn't, frankly, costing us anything. All the costs of Fit Money, I mean, it's a time issue. It's 6 hours a year. So I don't really see any of those two pilots impacting our budgeting process.
Yeah, I'm thinking Fit Money, if there's more of a home engagement, that might have some cost to it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty clear with the Fit Money team that this needs to be coming and supported and funded through them, so I'm not anticipating a district cost for that. You know, I think those two, I'm really trying to be creative about how we fund them. I think when we start to do these innovative projects, we want to make sure that they are enhancements and not taking away from the meat and potatoes of what we do. And so I think if we can continue to think how we are going to creatively support them, the better.
Okay.
So that's I'm just trying to think if there's anything else, but I think those are the.
But for Fit Money, as an example, there's some staff time that goes into that, right?
So we trained our staff after school, and we will be receiving a check from Fit Money to compensate for their time. So the idea is that it's not going to be a cost to the district.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think if there are any other
So the
pilots.
capstone, let's say capstone is going to be a mandatory requirement, or we think it's going to be a more desirable program and we need to expand it to allow more participation. How does that fit into?
Yeah, so I would anticipate if the capstone's going to go to that, it would be in the FY18 budget, right? No, so 19 budget. That we would, I mean, the idea here is that we're going to get a few more kids through the Cambridge Institute, if these guys do their job over in China, and that we would be able to expand. And again, the good thing about that program is it's just third trimester.
Yeah.
So the cost of teacher time is not huge.
Okay.
We would never go to a place where every senior had to do that without, and we would need a few years of data to do that.
Yeah.
Right, and so I absolutely understand your question, but I think in those areas we're trying to fund those creatively so as not to impact our budget
Now,
process.
just, I want to clarify a comment, a point that Mr. Gross said. I always envisioned capstone as being like an elective, not a requirement.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, that's how you do it. I mean, most kids, if you make the decision to do a capstone project, depending on how it gets rolled out in North Andover, you actually limit the number of courses you take, and for some kids that's not doable, and for other kids it is, and I don't see it as a requirement, but if it becomes wildly successful, it's not going to go from 0 to 100 in a year.
Well, how many students are on the program this year?
So I think we have about 12 or so this is not going to be a huge number.
And do we know how many voiced interest in it?
I do not. And again, I will tell you in the first year of this thing, it's going to be messy.
Yeah, I understand.
I just having lived this expansion of a capstone, the first year was like a few kids who were kind of off the beaten trail, and it was exciting, and they didn't know what they were getting into, but they just jumped.
Yeah.
And then the next year it got a little bit more solid, and it just takes a while because it's different than what's happened for 13 years.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
could students sort of take, say, a robotics or a DECA project and turn that into a capstone?
Yes, so again, I'm not intimately involved in how the high school is going to roll this out, but in my experience, what happens is kids go deep on something they care about, and often it is connected to something else that they do.
So they could do that?
They could do that.
Okay.
But I think I really, there's a team of people doing this at the high school, and I really do want to make a lot of those, leave those decisions to them.
Okay, great.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions about that? So go forth.
Yes.
Okay.
Go forth and prosper. Right?
Okay, go forth. Just want to make sure that we're going forth. Mr. Mealy, budget. Yeah.
So,
Do we have to vote these?
do we give any feedback on this?
Yeah. Go. Give feedback.
Okay, just a couple small questions. Based on what I experienced doing the review before. So I want to make sure I am understanding how this works. So for your number one, decrease class sizes with a specific focus on elementary class size in order to better meet the needs of all students. That's a goal.
Yes.
So when we evaluate you in April, if you have not decreased class size by April, is that a fail? No, right?
Well, so I think the thing, so let's just take that one because I think it's really simple. So if by May, we have made no progress towards this goal, I think that's probably going to be unsatisfactory. If between now and then I don't do a darn thing about this, if we go forward and work really, really hard on this, and at town meeting, part of our plan is to increase elementary school classrooms, and they don't vote it, I'm probably not exemplary, and maybe we need to rethink, and if it gets voted, I think that we're moving in the right direction, would be me moving forward on that, and you can kind of decide if my role is in the proficient range or the exemplary range. So to me, that one's pretty simple, but I also agree that I haven't decreased class size, but my plan, and if you remember, each of these have phase 1 and phase 2,
Right.
so I'd ask you to think about it in terms of phase 1, and so I took the benchmarks from the phase 1 process.
And all that makes sense to me. I don't think the statement at the top reflects what you just said.
Yeah, so I guess I did that because I wanted to keep it in line with the strategic initiatives and not put a whole bunch of language there.
Right. I
So,
understand, but if we all agree that that's what we mean, what we mean is if you complete these bullets below,
yeah.
you'll have, succeeded at a certain level.
You will not have decreased it in this year.
Right.
Right.
But the incremental step.
You
for
have taken the
subsequent-
actions that we
Right.
agreed upon for making this down the road happen, then that's fine by me.
Yeah.
But that statement does not say that.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's more about the key actions and benchmarks,
That's-
and I hit those.
Yep.
Okay.
But to Ms. Mably's point, you might just give some thought to a little bit of rewording of that, so it talks about increment.
I would push in
ties
that
right
I
to
would
this document.
really like to keep it in line with the strategic plan.
That's the goal.
Right.
And we're either agreeing or disagreeing with the key actions and benchmarks.
Okay.
The goal is to reduce class size.
But
It's-
it won't have been achieved by the end of the year.
But that's not what we're agreeing to. We're agreeing to hold her accountable and hold the department accountable to the key actions and the benchmarks.
Okay, if that's what we're agreeing to, then that's fine. But it doesn't say that.
I think it's working towards that goal and knowing and understanding that that goal is a multi-year
Year.
approach.
Then it'd be great if we said that.
So I can put something at the
Phase one or
top that
something.
says working towards. Perfect.
That's all.
I would just like to keep these the same.
I
so
know,
that
I
if
agree.
somebody
Yeah,
looks, they can
Because
see that
this
I'm
one
in
color
line.
page is great.
Yeah.
And that is basically what we carry around and focus on.
Yeah.
And I agree with
Not a
that.
speech for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Good. That's fair.
Thank you.
I think, the only thing that is just not to belittle it or anything, but because it's a 17 goal, right, it's not your goal over your next 3 years.
Right.
And that's probably, it is your goal for the next couple of years, but here we're saying it's your 17 goal. So, yeah, I'm fine. And I think we'll be taking all of these steps regardless, so.
Are there questions or comments? Mr. Brewer?
No, good, thank you. Good.
I just had one comment on the pretty picture.
yes. Doesn't that look nice?
It really does. She did
I
a
would
great
like to
job.
thank the Wakefield Public Schools who had a template like this that the superintendent, Dr. Kim Smith, allowed me to
Leverage.
That's very
emulate.
delicate.
Emulate, yeah.
She gave me express permission.
There you go. In the, just as an example in the curriculum area, at some point, do you ever envision us tying this to student academic achievement goals in some way?
Yeah, so it's really tricky. I mean, if you look at the Wakefield one, they have outcomes, increase SGPs of MCAS, and, there's a few things I'd like to push on that. One is, as we're going to talk about at the MCAS report, we are in a MCAS morass right now as a state. We had 32% of the districts take MCAS, so when we talk about SGPs and comparisons, we're going to you're going to look cross-eyed at us. So that's concerning. And then two, if you really look at what these are, it's hard to say what would be the appropriate measures for each of these. And I absolutely understand that some of these are output objectives right now and not outcome. But I'm struggling, and I'm a data geek, I'm struggling to figure out specifically what outcomes make the most sense. I think part of that is so often districts have just plugged in MCAS, and I think that's too simplistic. And I think we're getting somewhere with MAP, but I think for this year I'm anxious to put that there as we don't really understand the MAP data. And so I just don't have an easy answer to that for this year. Not to say that we wouldn't moving forward, but for this year, a lot of the work that we need to do is kind of get the engine set up correctly so that it can run.
I appreciate that. However, having said that, and I'm not into comparisons with other districts or anything. I'm just looking at us over time, right? So if I go back and I look at CPI over time by school, how does that look?
Yeah, but
what does that mean?
Stan, I'm just going to push. I will happily talk about this with the MPAS conversation. This year, I am not confident around the reliability of those tests. I'm just not, only 32% of districts took it. So, and the third grade test that you're going to see, our kids did much poorer than they've ever done, right? And I fundamentally believe that is a part of the fact that they basically made third grade MCAS 2.0 without telling us. And next year, this coming year, we're required to have all of our 4th and 8th graders take it on the computer. There is a known statistical dip when you take it on the computer for the first time. So if I was more comfortable in the measures, I would be comfortable with that. I'm not. And so I'm anxious to put a strategic plan reliant on measures that I don't feel I can stand behind.
Could I add one thing, Dr. Price? I think the other component, too, is with the MCAS, it significantly changed this year. They eliminated the 4th and 7th grade long composition.
It really hurts.
They added park-like questions, and they had experimental questions. And for the first time, and you guys know I love the MCAS data, But for the first time ever, with 32% of the schools taking the MCAS, the rest taking part just to be held harmless, with an interpretive bridge guide putting it all together, I personally believe it's going to take 3 to 5 years for the state to beta test and get everything normed. It's going to take a while for the state to get their act together because it's all new to them.
Okay,
Just a thought.
I get and I accept all of that. However, having said that, at some point, as you've helped encourage us to do, we're going to want to go back to the town and ask for money, more money, right? Whatever it's per, per pupil spending, however you want to look at it. And I think we need to be able to have a discussion about how we're going to measure outcomes based on what we ask for.
I don't disagree. I'm just not confident that I have the outcomes that I'm confident
Okay,
in.
and I think that as long as that's part of the discussion
Absolutely.
going forward.
And
I'm good
I
with
get
that.
it. I mean, we're going to do a group, we're going away for a little retreat in North Andover next week to look at kind of making the strategic initiatives and the strategic overview really become alive. And we're going to look at the difference between outputs and outcomes. The challenge is, I think, this year, with all of the questions on the outcomes, I felt very uncomfortable putting it on there. But we got to get there.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could voice a comment?
Sure.
So actually two. One is when we had the decision of whether we thought we wanted to stay with MCAS or go park, one of the reasons why we wanted to stay with MCAS, if you recall, was so we had the continuity of the benchmark, so
Yep.
we could do the self-reflection on where we really need to help our students or where we need to change our opportunities. So I appreciate that they changed the tool, and that's going to be a potential catastrophe for us to understand, what part of our process, if any, is broken, needs to be fixed. But with that said, I do agree with Mr. Limpert that we might need some inside-out look at performance and inside-out look at the quality that we provide our students. Maybe not an outside-in, but depth and breadth of curriculum, number of students, and SAT or PSAT scores as a surrogate that might help us backfill as the state figures out which way is up with public education.
I agree.
And I'm not asking you to make.
But I don't know what those answers are.
I don't disagree, but I think that we do need some of that because that's part of the story, that's part of the narrative. And I'm not asking you to make the sun come up in the west, but I think we do need to come up with some rational surrogate to what has typically been a community visible high water.
And we were hoping that MCAS was going to do that, and we
Doesn't
just
look like they
got
did.
we just got the results. They're just going public next week, and
Okay.
our initial analysis of that is that we're not confident in that.
Okay.
And so that's we kind of that's been the benchmark we've been using for years. They come back out, and we go, wow, what can we learn from this?
Right.
I think we'll learn some things, and we'll have the principals come, and we have some areas of improvement and all that, but it's not giving us a story that we're confident in.
I think what's interesting too, Brian, is if I recall correctly, when we voted to stick with MCAS, at that time it was around 62, 63%
Yeah.
of the schools were going to go with MCAS,
Right.
and then the state came out with that hold harmless provision.
And
Yeah, everyone jumped.
And everyone, it went from like in 2 months, 64% were taking MCAS or something like that, and then it just went.
To the point.
Well, we don't want to steal thunder for the next conversation, but I do think we want to give some thought to what are
Absolutely.
meaningful inside-out views of how we're developing and what the quality of our education to our students is.
And the reality of the situation is this strategic overview was developed very concretely with things that we all felt comfortable with that needed to be addressed, that we could put our names behind and feel like we could make happen. Once I started thinking about outcomes, it got to a point where we just felt like we couldn't be confident in those. And I didn't want to start putting outcomes on the strategic overview if we didn't know what those were.
That's fair.
And, I want to be confident when we publish things and talk about things and that we understand what makes the most sense. And, throwing up an SGP that we're looking for on a test that I don't have a lot of confidence in felt sort of like an add-on.
Right.
Where the rest of this, I can look at any one of these and understand what we need to accomplish to get it done.
So what do you expect will be the process by which we will be able to socialize some outcome measures that we think are meaningful to the district?
I don't know yet, but I'll get there. Again, one of the things we're going to do next Tuesday is really think about that.
Okay.
And I think we're going to have to expand our understanding of outcomes,
Good
which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, good point. Great, thank you.
So now I guess the question is, do we need to do we need to vote to concur with our goals? What do we need to do with these as a
I
committee?
think we have voted our goals in the past.
Yeah, I think we have, but I respectfully submit that we probably want to defer this until we're at full strength.
I would, that
Right.
would be.
So I'll make a
Unless there's
few,
a-
I'll make the few changes and we can go through the motion.
Yeah, unless there's a regulatory purpose for having to have this
No.
approved by a certain date.
It seems
No.
too important to just kind of.
No, I agree.
I'd like to have the.
And there's a few changes we'll make for the next meeting.
Good. All right. Thank you very much.
Good.
Okay.
I would just like to say I'm really excited that we have shared goals.
I want to, I guess what I'd like to say is I'd like to thank you for moving us in a direction so we, the school committee, have intelligent goals. This is good progress for us,
Yeah.
too. So I appreciate you helping us get to this, which is makes much more sense now, I think, than anything we've done in the past. So that's a good
I'm
thing.
excited about it.
Yep, that's good. Okay, budget update?
So at this time of the year, we've got two things we're working on. One is taking all of the new employees and replacing them into the slots that were held by retiring, resigning employees, and that results in our turnover savings. And then the second big thing that we've started our every other week meetings, Donna and myself and a few others in the office, to review the out-of-district placements and where we are with regards to those, what's happened over the summer. So we're wrapping up that, and we'll have the initial projections for the year, the initial report for both the budget and for any impact we might anticipate on the Special Education Stabilization Fund. At this time of the year, obviously, we're in the positive and don't need to tap into it yet, but as the year goes on, if those things come up, you'll be made aware of them as they happen. So the next meeting, while Gilly and I won't be here, a budget status report will be. So it'll be the initial one. Usually October is our initial budget status report for the year.
Just put it on the agenda so Mr. Mealy could explain that, so when he's not here.
And who gets to stand in for you then when you're not here to do all the explaining?
I think
That'll
I think
be
you're looking at her.
Dr. Price. Yep.
Nice.
And Dr. Strait, you can help me with this question.
We'll come up with extra questions.
I mean, I will say that as of this moment, and I don't want to jinx us, we are not in a panic around our out-of-district costs, which sometimes this year, or this year you can be. It's not that we're ecstatic, but we're not in a panic.
Any preliminary ideas about turnover?
About what we've been seeing, yeah. And generally, as we've said in the past, it covers certain things. In particular, the column movement that occurs gets covered by turnover savings, and then there'll be some left over. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Okay, enrollment.
Yes, Mr. Mealy.
Okay, so Mr. McDevitt had asked about this information at the last meeting and asked to be provided it. I did display it, but I think we'll take this opportunity. I just want to talk through what you're looking at, and you can make heads or tails of it as you wish from there. So
We've had fun with Mr. Mealy and I having a conversation about this about 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to figure out, is all I'm going to tell you.
Well, and what happens is it's a lot of data, and so it's easy to forget which is actual and which is projection. So I just want to walk through what you're looking at. The first page are all actual numbers. The 2016-17 are as of last week on a certain day. They change daily. All of the other years are the official October 1 approved numbers. And at some point, 2016 and 17 will become the October 1. Right, and those will be the in-cement numbers. But when you look at this color coding, what you're looking at is if you take a look at the left-hand column where it says year, that is the year of birth of those students. And they began kindergarten in the 93-94 school year. And there were 232 births, and there were 333 students that started kindergarten when they were that age.
So
And
by about 100.
yeah,
So 100 movements
in
kind of, or
from everything I've been
holdbacks
told,
and
you
everything.
cannot use
Okay.
births as any type of indicator of how many kindergarten students you're going to have. Okay, so then if you just follow the color, you're following that group of students through their school years. So 333 kindergarten students became 391 first graders the following year, and 369 second graders the year after that, and so on. So you can see how it fluctuates from one year to the next, and then there are certain years you would anticipate that happening as they move from 5 to 6, elementary to middle school, or middle school to high school. And so you can see a certain number of cohorts moving through our school system. And I found it interesting that 333 kindergartens become 312 graduates, and 334 become 335. There's not a lot of consistency, but the numbers are there for you to see.
The thing that would, just the curiosity, be great to take the list of names of the 333 kindergartners and see how many of those names pop out as 312. How many went K to 12 in our school district?
Are you volunteering to do this?
I would be happy to do that. You give me the data, I'd be happy to make that correlation. That's a simple spreadsheet exercise. Mash those two together, I'm good. Right?
So that-
What do you
We can do a Google form with the seniors.
Okay.
So-
Just moving on.
So the other thing wait a minute, Mr. Mealy, can you go back? I just want to highlight two things. First of all, I just want us to look at the totals of pre-K to 12. So we're up a significant number of students in the last 20 years. 25 years. I mean, that's a significant increase from 3,500 to 4,800 almost. So the district has grown, and I think it's important to just acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing I just want to draw your attention to, which we're going to see, is you can see from last year to this year, we're up about 42 kindergarten kids. And that last year was a dip in kindergarten, and we were celebrating small kindergarten classroom sizes. And now we're back, if not at one of the highest points we've had of kindergarten registrations.
Well, I'm just going to say, obviously there was some press over probably the past 2 or 3 days about, perhaps kindergartens, and a consolidation of that. And what's happening with the kindergartens? And if you look at the numbers that are here, and there isn't an average here for what it is, but I'm going to guess it's somewhere around 325, 330.
Just about, yeah.
That's relatively consistent, but that does not correlate to the growth that we see in those subsequent years, because, we're still up, roughly 1,200 students between 93 and 2017.
Mr. Mealy can talk about what that looks like this year on the next one. But I just wanted to highlight those two things.
Yeah, and before I do, I will highlight the fluctuations that occur in the kindergarten numbers. The most difficult part of creating the enrollment projection model is, frankly, the kindergarten number. Because there's no correlation between births and kindergarten students. And even the census that we take, it's very difficult. We would have not anticipated 342 students this year after having 300 last year, especially when you look at the number of births that occurred.
And the other thing that I think is important is, we did contract with NESDEC to help us with that number, and those numbers are there, and they weren't really online. And so one of the things that we're going to have to think about as a group as we go forward, thinking about the facilities and the planning for this, is are we going to use the Mealy model, or are we going to go out and contract with NESDEC? And NESDEC just wasn't that close, so I just want us to see that.
These are kindergarten numbers.
Yep.
Because that was perfect.
So the other kind of quick thing that I just want to thank you, Mr. Mealy, because this is great. We're always curious to see our 8th grade students and the retention that we have as they, get into the opportunities for private high schools and kind of going out. And one of the interesting things that we've always kind of seen, and I'm sure we've seen this chart before, but this is very helpful. We do see that dip between 8th and 9th grade, and I feel like it has gotten lesser, or it's fluctuated a little bit, but it is decreasing a little bit. But we do see a little bit of uptick coming between 9th and 10th grade as well. So,
what we've noticed is a lot of it seems to be economy driven. And so when I first started here, things were rough and students were staying in North Andover. And as the economy has improved, we started to see that number go up again.
Right. Well, Mr. Mailer would tell you that coincides with the excise tax, and whether or not they're buying cars.
That's his indicator. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's right.
Yep.
That's right. Benefit from adding excise tax to our model.
The Mailer model.
Well, if they're going to do logistic regression, that might be a useful signal.
It could be one of the ways to do it. Yes.
Yeah, great, thank you.
So the second page, just to explain
Logistic regression.
how we come up with our projections. If you look at the top chart, you're looking at the actuals for those years, and I've highlighted those transition years, K to 1, 5 to 6, 8 to 9. But the green row was what our model projected for
Projections are
16, 17. And the way that we've done it is to take the 5-year average of the previous 5 years to determine the average either increase or decrease in that transition. So either from kindergarten to first grade, third grade to fourth grade, and then apply that average to the existing class number and project it forward to the next year.
So you can see those top numbers up there are what we, from the K to 1, we increased by 15, 1 to 2, 5.2, using the Mealy model. And just a quick, so the average, we were expecting an increase of 19.4. I'd like to see the 0.4 student, but we were expecting a 19.4 increase. And as of this date, if you look down at the bottom part, we had increased by 79 kids. So we're up about 60 kids over what we projected. The numbers are down a little bit. It's more like 65 right now. It changes daily. But we're clearly up over even what we projected to be up this year.
So two other things, there's a lot on here, but two other things I'd like to highlight are the second to the bottom chart, where it says 2015, 2016, and then projection and actual. You see that chart?
So projection is for this year.
So what I did there is the top is last year's class numbers. Kindergarten was at 300, first grade was 332. And then the second row is what our model projected. So if you just follow the color, the red 300, our model projected that our first grade class would be 315. We would see a pickup of 15 students. Then if you go below that, what we actually got was 327 students. So we picked up 12 more than we would have anticipated. And the same with the first grade. We would only anticipate a pickup of 5 from 332 to 337, but we jumped up to 358. And then the blue, you can see, instead of 374, it actually went down to the third grade in 367. So that's how that works.
And the plus minuses are right above, so you can see, you see that? So what we're seeing is more kindergartners, which we had anticipated. However, we're seeing more first and second graders than we had anticipated, which is somewhat problematic because those kids will stay with us. Yep. So, I mean, problematic and exciting. I don't mean to say problematic.
And the biggest takeaway for me, I've highlighted in that middle chart that shows you the 2016, 2017, the NESDEC projections, the model projections, and the actual. I highlighted that bottom row, what we had not anticipated. For one, the kindergarten, like I said, I plugged in that we did not project, nor in NESDEC, I gave them credit for having the exact kindergarten number just to kind of compare the models fairly. But we did not anticipate 42 more students in kindergarten, and we certainly didn't anticipate 12 and almost 21 more in the first and second grade.
Right.
So we're seeing growth right now in kindergarten, first and second grade. And then at the other end, 10 and 11 were unusual, where we have 12 and 14 more students than we had anticipated in those two grades. So you can theorize about why, and we got to look more into it. But I just wanted to give you an understanding of what this is, and you guys, the more eyes on these, the better.
Yep. So can I just ask a couple of quick questions, Mr. Mealy? So I'm trying to go back, and I'm trying to go back through my kids because I
That's
had
what I was doing.
because I had to pay for kindergarten, and I was, I think, the last grade. But so 2014, 2015, that's the last year. Or that is the year that kindergarten became free, and we had 335.
14, 15 was the
14, 15. So we had 300. I'm sorry, 335.
I think that was the first year.
Yes. So, yeah, 2 columns back, and then we've actually seen a little bit of a decrease, but we're seeing our numbers in first grade stay relatively stable, and then a bigger uptick in grade 2, it seems, or am I?
No, that's what it says.
And I think one of the things that we thought about as we moved to a free day kindergarten was, that we would see an influx, and we didn't necessarily, but that some parents would not want their children to go to a full day kindergarten program, that they would keep them and do kindergarten elsewhere, and then we would see them come in first grade. But we're seeing that number between kindergarten and first stay relatively stable, and then the uptick's really starting.
But look,
I
look at
think
the 15-16.
what surprised
group.
me-
The small class became 327 in first grade. So some of those kids did come back or show up, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what you're saying, there may have been some hesitancy about kindergarten, but then they went to first grade, right?
Two things surprised me about kindergarten. One is I anticipated that our numbers would go up in kindergarten when we had full day. But they fluctuate from one year to the next, and it doesn't look like we're seeing an increase. We're just seeing that normal fluctuations.
Right.
And the second part was that I thought we would have had more, for the same reason, that we had more students who weren't in our kindergarten program, so we would have seen a bigger transition number when we only had the half day for free. But we're not. It wasn't a big transition.
Right.
Most of them were coming to us anyway, and so we haven't seen that much of a difference there.
Again, no correlation to births in
No.
town either. So,
No.
I mean, it's just,
And to Mr. McDevitt's earlier point, there also seems to be kind of a random fluctuation in the 8 to 9 transition too. I mean, it's up and down. It doesn't seem to have
It's
clear
amazing how
pattern.
much of a difference, and that's why we use a 5-year average.
Yeah.
Right.
But even that, you can see it's inexact. I put in there what NESDEC projections had shown, and you can see where they had us for this year at 4765, so much higher, by over 100 than what we really are.
So help me understand, does NESDEC model forward based on the number of residents that are built in town? Or is this all retrospective?
It's not retrospective.
They model forward.
They model forward based on.
And that's one thing that concerns me about the Mealy model is it's retrospective and it doesn't necessarily, unless you have a secret math input, it doesn't model the number of new homes and
Yeah,
new
and
apartments.
it actually, when I went to a conference and it talked about how to, project, they recommended at the time that you don't try to account for developments in your model, but that you might manually then, if you're seeing
Adjust.
something, exactly.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I mean, we have at least 400 new housing units in between Barry and what's being proposed down by 125.
forgetting your phone.
And even if the model is low on that, that is a substantial amount of potential kids.
So I think the town manager has put that at an 8% increase. So the question is, how do we do an 8% increase on student population? How do we handle that? It's something we're going to have to talk about.
Because you can't guess what grade.
But I mean, this is relevant to the conversation
Yep.
about class size because
Absolutely.
given that it's 8% plus or minus something,
Yep.
then when we do our class modeling,
Correct.
it's got to be fact plus growth plus a buffer.
Yep.
Because if we're on the wrong side of 8%, that's going to be a big
But
problem.
Ms. Mabley's point, distributed across the K through 12 spectrum, right? So,
Well, but I agree, but I mean, the problems we get faced are in 3 or 4 general areas, right? There's kindergarten, there's 1 through 5, and then there's middle school and high school. And I think high school probably has the ability to absorb.
Yeah, but nowhere else does, unfortunately.
Right, and then we have to start thinking about curriculum changes to absorb at middle school, which is already a challenge. So I would say that our focus should be on kindergarten 1 through 5, which is what we're focusing on now. But I'm also very concerned about the middle school because they're busting at the edge,
Yes,
and there's not much more we
absolutely.
can do there.
Can I make one point, Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
One of the, I know we're going to have a lot of conversation about what we're going to recommend in terms of the building. I mean, one of the advantages of a kindergarten space is that we can deal with this fluctuation and have a year buffer to get ready for it. So last year and the spring, we were actually wondering if we should decrease a kindergarten because of the registrations. We had so many kindergarten registrations over the summer. Thank goodness we did not reduce that, because we were going to have to, if we didn't add that class at Thompson, we were going to reduce a kindergarten at Thompson. We would have been one fewer, and it would have been a bad decision that we made, and we didn't make it, which is good. But one of the things that it does allow is the place that is the hardest for us to judge is kindergarten. So if we have a kindergarten complex, we can move up and down one class. It's no big deal, really. And then it allows us to understand, as we prepare a year out, what is our kindergarten population as we budget for the following year. Like at this time, we would know what's our kindergarten population, how many of those kids are slated to go to the various schools, and we would be able to really think about the rest of the 1 through 5. So there is some advantage to kind of giving us a year lag time through a consolidated kindergarten.
It makes perfect sense. I'm sorry, the point I was trying to make, though, is I think we've got a robust, at least mental model of how to deal with kindergarten 1 through 5. I'm less worried about the high school. I am very worried about the middle school.
I'm very worried
I don't
about
know
the
if we have
middle
a
school.
plan yet in the conversation on how this fits into the needs as
So-
architects.
Dr. Price, there's a plan.
Here's a law.
But
So I think that one thing I've really learned about North Andover is, and I respect, I think that the municipal side has really modeled for us, is this kind of phased approach. And I think that, through conversations with many of you and conversations with the town manager, it made a ton of sense to start with elementary class sizes.
Sure.
That resonates with people, that feels very real, understanding with 28 kids in a third grade class. Middle school gets a little harder to explain, a little more challenging. And so I think, and I think I've been very transparent with this with everyone I've talked to, this is the first step. And I think that what rises to the next major concern is middle school. Middle school is going to be much more complex than what we're going to go through this year in terms of just thinking about middle school. And the building and the structure and what does it look like. This is kind of our test run. Once we get this down, then I think we're kind of in AAA right now, and then we're going to move to the majors when we start talking about middle school. But I have been very honest with you when I look at middle school class sizes. They are the worst in the district. We ameliorated it a little bit with related arts addition, and that was like, but we can ameliorate it much more given the team structure and that building. We just don't have the space. So it's a big deal, and we're gonna work very hard to make sure that as we've rolled out a plan for the elementaries and started to talk about that, we will have a similar approach to the middle school issue.
And just going back to one other thing you said about the retroactive aspect of the model, one benefit of that is that we can actually we can reverse engineer the impact that some of these developments have had to kind of factor in what impact we think any future developments can have, based on what it should have been and then what it was because of that development, and start to utilize that.
Because I've been, since I think you said at the last meeting that Stevens Corner, I think it is, was projected to have 5, but there are 31 students, 7, but there are 30.
It's actually
I thought it was senior
11 and
housing,
31,
so
yeah.
I did. That frightens me that if we're applying similar projections to these 2 new major developments, not we, but whoever does those, they're way off. And
They can be way off.
They can.
That's
not
certainly
not
was.
every development is.
That's why
but
when,
they
thinking,
can.
Right.
when we're thinking about our planning, I appreciate we're going for what has the most impact, but we really should be thinking about buffering across the board
Yeah.
as part of the plan. Because, if the answer is, we need to do a K building, right, and create a learning center for K, that mitigates the 1 through 5, but maybe we also need to think about contingency for something at middle school as well
Right.
with that first phase. I assume the architects will be looking at that district-wide, and we will at least have that as something to discuss later.
Yeah, we won't have the middle school to discuss in December, but we will have that to discuss later.
I guess let me just a follow-up question to you, Dr. Price. So where do you think we stand with respect to continuing to use NESDEC as a enrollment projection?
Yeah, so I think Mr. Mealy and I are not that confident in the NESDEC's predictions.
You wouldn't see them much longer. I mean, those were projections that were still existing. We don't pay for the service any longer.
Okay.
So they're kind of falling off as far as what their projection
But I
would
mean,
be.
from what we see, it doesn't look like we would want to be paying for it.
No, and I put it there so that we could judge whether or not
Yeah.
we wanted to go back to them, or if we were, comfortable to continue it, to modify our model.
Right.
But I liked having that comparison.
Yeah,
No, it's helpful.
What was the last update from the NESDEC model?
3 years ago.
Okay.
So they were projecting 3 years
Okay.
ahead.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
And that's why I gave them the benefit of the doubt on the kindergarten.
You gave him a pass on that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and
That's fair.
I think the best, kind of the most fun with this, Mr. Mealy, is being able to look at the longitudinal stuff. I mean, look at the class size changes.
It amazes me how much it fluctuates.
I know,
from one year to the
it's
next.
interesting.
Even within just like second to third, or
Yeah.
9, 10 to 11.
No.
And
Well,
what do you attribute that to? To transient populations? To
There's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes these pressure points are created, depending on what's on the market. It's just amazing what comes in the homes people buy in August.
Right.
And it's just a lot of it's coincidence. It's more kids in second.
Well, and you can certainly, with this, we can certainly answer Mr. McDevitt's question about the 8 to 9 transition. I mean, it's all there, and you can try to decide what the impact may have been that made those numbers look that way. But it's
Yep.
interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we have two trips. One of them is a new trip to us. I think we've done this every year. It's the DECA trip down to Washington, D.C. They're flying, and you can see everything here. It's the annual DECA conference, I believe, that they go down for. And I believe that Mr. Gilligan just got asked to chaperone this one, right?
Yeah, I haven't checked with the boss yet, but
I hear she's rough.
I was asked by Mr.
You're
Doolin.
racking up those frequent flyers.
I know.
Not as many issues.
So this is something we've done before. I think we've worked on this form to try to get all your questions answered.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Did they typically meet at Logan? Do we know if they typically met at Logan? Has that been a challenge?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't know whether they all went down together.
is this implied that
They
Yeah,
met
I
at
mean-
Logan and they had.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, having done these trips before, is it costs a lot of money to get you down to Logan. So if
Yeah.
parents want to put their kids together, and it saves us money.
I get it. I just want to make sure it's not going to be, someone's mom or dad didn't show up and.
Yeah, it's only 12 students, so I
That's
also
why
would
I'm almost
think that
worried,
there
yeah.
would be, if mom or dad couldn't do it, there's other kids going down. So
Yeah.
it's probably about 3 carloads
Mr.
worth of
Gilligan
kids.
can handle it.
Yeah.
They'll take them back on the scooter.
He's going to put them on the scooter and they'll be
We'll talk about that.
We'll be
Maybe
extra
not.
liability.
Maybe not. Thank you.
I will also make one other comment. I did choose not to have the principal come for this. I felt that if there were questions, I know in the past the principal has come for this, and I felt like, respecting the principal's time, I know that was the past practice, but after a year, I felt like we'll go round 1. If there's enough questions in a round 2, that I would then ask the principal to come.
The form you're using makes a lot of the
But-
questions.
Right.
I hope that that's
answerable.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just felt like a night out to answer questions about a field trip was.
Yeah, a little much.
So my only comment is, I know this is about 2 months away. I mean, any delay in terms of our next meeting, which is, I forget, October 4th or something like that,
13th.
13th, for them to then be purchasing tickets, or are they in the position where they can purchase today?
Yeah.
Certainly the April or February trip, they're driving
Yep.
into Boston, but
Right.
I want to make sure that the students can get the best fare as possible.
Yeah, I would, I think what we've done is if there are concerns raised at this time, then we kind of halt, but in terms of official approval, we can wait until October 13th.
Okay.
If you give me concerns at this point, well, then we kind of halt stuff, but if the general consensus is this makes sense, we don't halt,
Okay.
if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd be fine with waiving policy to approve it if they needed to book.
Yeah, I think they'll go ahead and book.
Okay,
I
great.
think we're good.
The second one is going into Boston, this was originally a trip you had approved already to go down to Virginia. The cost became too prohibitive, so they've made a decision to just take the same. We approved a trip to Virginia, but the cost just got too high, and this is for the Model UN, and they're going to be going into Boston. So this is a rejigger of a trip based on cost.
Is this now an overnight?
Yes, it's an overnight staying in Boston.
Did it change the number of students now that it's less expensive, or?
So I think in Model UN, you have a certain number of kids you
already
can
do?
take.
Okay.
But the trip down to Boston was, so,
Out of that, the funding, does that also include the bus, or is the school going to be supplying the bus?
I would assume this includes the
It
bus.
says NAPS bus, but.
Yeah, so school bus, but that doesn't mean that we don't pay for the school buses. So
That's correct.
one of the things we've worked really hard in is to make sure that when people take buses on field trips, that they go through approved vendors. That comes from my Newton background, so I'm very sensitive to making sure we have high quality vendors. So often, if we can, we go through our approved transportation.
That makes sense, and having been a chaperone on several very scary bus rides. So.
Yeah. So I've worked really hard with the transportation and Jim and Lucy to just say, here are the list of bus vendors we approve, and if they have a bad safety record, we cannot approve them even if they're cheaper.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
It does.
All
So-
right, thank you.
So again, I think we will approve them next time. But,
Yep.
okay.
Good, okay. No public, no comment. So anything from the committee?
I have just two quick items. One is the town council group had met, and we believe at this point that on the 26th, at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, the town manager and the chair will be providing a few candidates that have gone through the rigorous first and second round interviews.
I think it's fair to say 3.
Okay, didn't know whether the number
Yep.
was 3 or not, and I think at this point, they're in the process of vetting references and making final provisions for introducing the candidates at the Board of Selectmen meeting. So, again, some excellent candidates. I think whoever the Board of Selectmen go with will be very, very happy with. And I hope to be at the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 26th with Mr.
That's the
Teresi
26th.
to at least voice our support as a member of the Town Council Search Committee.
Will there be public questions for those candidates, or at some point, or?
So the Board of Selectmen actually makes the approval, so I think that they're going to be questioned, kind of similar to when you all interviewed me as superintendent.
Exactly.
So, and I think from our standpoint, I think I speak for Mr. Teresi, all 3 of us would be happy with any of the 3.
Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the other shout out is a reminder that October 1st, Joe Walsh Stadium, 17 bands.
Really?
16.
16 bands, excuse me,
There you
right?
Yeah.
And you heard there's guarantee for good weather, so
Yeah, that was
everyone must
impressive.
attend the music marching band
It was
fundraiser as
cold
well.
last year.
It was. So, thank you.
Actually, 2 things. One, if you haven't been, and I think we all probably have, but October 6th is the middle school family geography night, which is ridiculously awesome. 5:30 to 7, and the coolest thing is to literally go inside the Globe Dome. I forget exactly what the right term for it is, but to see the Earth from the inside out, and see, all of the continents and the migration. It's just absolutely fascinating, and it's such a amazing event that I really encourage people to go and attend. And it's not just for middle school kids or siblings.
family.
It's really a community type event, and so. I just think it's fantastic. So thank you again to all the teachers at the middle school who support that. And then the other thing is something that I know we have talked about, but I'm just going to, I hear an awful lot from people in terms of transportation. And this is, a challenge that I know that the district has been working really hard on it. There were new bus routes that were published probably either a day or 2 days ago. And I just want to be really cautious of what time we have students arriving at school and whether or not they're arriving, 20 minutes or so before bells ring for that, because I think it really backs things up an awful lot. So I know that it's continuously kind of being looked at. I can tell you for myself, my bus stop is on the schedule at 7:40. The bus is never there until 7:55 or so. It's supposed to be at Kittredge at roughly 8 o'clock. They don't even let them out of the buses until 8:10. So I mean, just kind of looking at what that schedule is, I hope that process is still kind of.
We are working incredibly hard. We did add an
I
additional
understand.
bus, which
Absolutely.
is a big move because we had more kids subscribe.
Yes.
And I know that Lucy and Jim are working incredibly hard and talking to tons and tons of parents
Yes.
about it. And the challenge just is we're getting some complaints about the high school being so early. The challenge is if the high school doesn't get there, then we can't run the middle. We can't run the elementary school runs. It's a tricky one, but Lucy is constantly looking at trying to get them better and better. And one thing I will say, as we've talked about, you fix one thing and then you create a whole bunch of other problems. So
Right.
I'm feeling bad for her, like fixing. Yeah, you want to
I was going to
comments?
say, we do appreciate the frustration that people can experience. The difficult part is that we have to try to make this as fair as possible for 2,000 riders.
Right.
So we can't always accommodate the requests. Specific to one thing you did say, one thing we're looking at really closely right now is the arrival time at school of one tier and then the start time of the next tier, so that we just want to give enough time to get to the first stop,
Right.
and make sure that those buses aren't getting to the school too early.
Correct.
So we're making adjustments with regards to that as well.
Okay.
The other thing I would say, having looked at this from the outside in, is we continue to just take anyone who shows up here and say we'll put them on a bus. Some districts make a decision that you have to be in by a certain date or you have to wait until October 1, October 15th. We've been a full-service district where if you show up today, we try to pick you up within tomorrow. And that creates a lot of stress on and I know many of a district and many of a superintendent who basically says, okay, if you're not in by August 1, you're not in until October 1. Which then allows us to be tighter, but it also precludes new people to the district, families who make a different decision, a parent who forgets to write the check. And, one of the kind of byproducts of us being a come and we'll take care of you is that it's completely fluid. I mean, that creates the challenge for us is, somebody could walk in tomorrow and now we have to have a stop.
Yep. Yeah, I do absolutely appreciate the job that Lucy and Mr. Mealy are doing on it, but
Yep, we are very aware.
I'm sure you are. I think I hear the phones ringing in the back.
Much closer bus stops than a lot of communities.
Yeah.
You know.
And the fact that we added a bus, I mean, that was a big, we felt like we could do it within our.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mention that because I've had a number of people say, I put my kids on the bus and then I end up kind of following it and, it goes 8 houses and there's another stop and then it goes 3 more, And I think we're very accommodating in a lot of those measures.
I was
And that
driving.
adds to.
I was driving out through Boxford the other day to go to a meeting, or coming back from a meeting down in Beverly, and I noticed it might have been Georgetown. It was one of those communities that way. I get lost once I get through Boxford. But
Once you leave North Andover.
it wasn't Boxford. It was probably one of the next communities over. But the buses didn't stop frequently, and what I noticed was there were huge spots with like 15, 20 cars, and parents all gathered at the end of a street,
Yeah.
waiting for the bus, and then I'd follow the bus again, and I was like, this is great. It's not stopping like it does. If you get behind a bus in North Andover, forget it.
I used to get behind them.
Is there?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
But we are aware and working.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Mabel?
I'm all set for now. Thank you.
I just wanted to send our best wishes to Mr. Tracy and his family and hope that everything goes well and look to see him back here next week. Next meeting.
Ms. Mabley, I do think we missed one opportunity that we did introduce Ms. Mabley as the representative from the school committee to the PTOs today. And the idea of her attending the PTO co-presidents meeting was very well received in terms of, rather than us having to assign school committee members,
they felt it was less intimidating, I guess. Not the field that
It's a
needs.
messenger.
It
I
could be
guess,
you.
yeah. No, I think people have never known what to do with that.
Yeah.
And so now this way they know that during a meeting, hey, they can invite me to go to one of their meetings, but otherwise they can cover things in that meeting. So.
Oh, good, great. That's
And
good.
our best for Mr. Tracy.
Yeah, good. Okay, anything else? No?
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah.
And thank you, Mr.
All those in favor say aye.
I
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lindberg.
Thank you, Mr. Lindberg.